have Alpha if he gets in here to co-host, and then we'll invite the rest of them up as speakers as they get here. So
Sounds perfect.
let's just hang out for a second. I tried to send them all DMs.
A lot of news in the news today.
Yep.
Mike, I don't know how well you knew King. I can't think of his name.
Boone.
Yeah, very sad.
Yep.
Shocking, yeah, and sad. Alpha's here.
Okay. Let me get him up here.
In the meantime, can everybody please repost the space, add a few friends and everything? Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Alpha.
How's it going, Colonel?
Great.
And everybody else?
Great. So, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but did you want to say anything? I think, obviously, given the subject, it would be great to say a few words about Boone.
No, absolutely. I could do it now, or
yeah, do it right now. Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, first, yeah, I'm kind of taking it in just as much as everybody else. So I'm still, yeah, it's been a very rough day. We're coming off a rough week with Charlie Kirk, and then with the news of Boone today, and I found out with CanCon together after we finished Badlands Daily this morning, and it was not a whole lot to say, just hang out with each other. Boone was he really loved veterans, and he had the oath, that'll live on. General Flynn put that out there, but to me specifically, he was very, very kind. He's more kind on things that he said and did for me that I can share publicly. But what I'll say is, he's the definition of a leader and a warrior and a man of character. And it just, it hurts. We lost a really good friend today, and his wife, his kids, keep them in our prayers. Boone's the kind of guy that knows, if we were turning to him for advice right now, he's the kind of guy that would tell you, give yourself a moment to recognize what you're dealing with. But remember, we got a mission, and mission over everything. And I think he understands that, and, we always, and I'm sure we'll probably even talk about it tonight, we talk about being, in warfare. This is information warfare. And I've said it routinely that a lot of the same principles apply. And just like when you're in combat and something happens, you don't always have time to mourn the way you want, because, you're in the midst, the fog of war. And we're in one of those situations where, we got to honor our fallen brother. We got to keep his family in our prayers. Each one of us will deal with our hurt and emotions in different ways, but we also have to make sure that we are still moving forward. But and I see CanCon's here. We were together when we found out. Okay. But this has been a very, very hard day.
Yeah, I just threw him the mic too. Thank you for those words. Just so that you guys know, Boone was, from my perspective, one of those behind the scenes kind of guys. He followed me, I followed him. We didn't have personal conversations, but anytime that I post some very controversial things, especially from the military's perspective of some hard truths. And if he needed further clarification or references on things that I was discussing, he would always reach out behind the scenes and ask for, more reading material or whatever. He definitely was very interested in the truth. And to me, that says a whole lot about him. Um, Colonel Burton, I'm throwing you the mic if you want to accept that. Um, or you can request the mic, however you want to do it, so we can get you a mic. I threw CanCon the mic as well. So the way I want to do this is I want to basically approach it as a round table. I've got like four major topics to throw out to the panel. Kind of do a round table where everybody can say what their thoughts are on those particular topics, all dealing with the radicalization of our military. So I just ask, we're not going to raise hands or whatever. We're not going to throw mics out to the audience until the end. Be respectful, try not to talk over each other. And I wanted to start off, one of my favorite posters on X is a current active duty Army guy by the name of Infantry Dort, Dort. And that's actually his handle. If you guys aren't following, I suggest you do. He put out, um, obviously, being still on active duty, it was devastating to him to see all of the radical, crazy elements of people that are currently on active duty. So I want to read a post to you, and then we'll kind of open it up for your thoughts. My fellow Americans, listen to me. I'll explain it in a different way. There's a reason why we in the military act so harshly when people celebrate the death of innocent Americans. Forget the Constitution for a moment. Forget the laws. Let's talk about values, American values. We value life, period. Just as much as others in the Middle East value death. And the reason this shakes us so deeply in uniform is because we have seen this behavior before. Our War Department is ran by GWAT veterans. We spent years in wars with no end, surrounded by population that rejoiced at death. It wasn't just insurgents, it was entire villages. Death was the goal. They butchered each other for sport. They chopped each other up and they danced in the streets as if it were the 4th of July. This was alien to us, and many who witnessed it never made it home in spirit. Some took their own lives, unable to reconcile what they saw. In those dark days overseas, we survived by escaping in our minds, thinking of home, loved ones, clean streets, apple pie, Toby Keith on the 4th of July. A place where all was well and good under the sun, a place where life and love were worth not just dying for, but living for. So when we come home and we see celebrations of American death, where children cheer the killing of a president, and where adults in uniform worship death as unhinged as the terrorists we fought, it rips us apart. It throws us back into the world where everything was backwards. And in a fight or flight response, we set ourselves to defeat that thinking because it is the only place we have left. It makes no sense to us. Why fight a war in lands where death reigns supreme only to come home a few years later and see the same obsession with death happening here? Do you understand now? Do you see how horrifying this is? This isn't just about breaking the oath. It's about breaking the very fabric of what we fought to preserve. This thinking is a cancer and it must be cut out. For those still salvageable, fight the light, find God, find anything that brings you back to sanity, because the alternative is the death of America's soul. And no constitution can save a nation that no longer values life. I'd like to get the panel's thoughts on that. Alpha, you can go first.
Um, I'm always curious if the perspective, if that was from a grunt infantry guy.
He's a major in the
Um,
Army.
so do you know if he was in a like an infantry unit or
He
anything
is
like
he
that?
is infantry, yes.
Yeah, because there's just a tone and energy you can sense in those
Yes.
writings.
Yes.
You know, there's two, and CanCon can add to this. When I joined, there was two sets of military people that I knew. There were the guys that joined, you know, normal, I guess, I hate to say normal, but normal time before 9/11, and the guys that joined just after 9/11. And the guys that joined just after did have the mentality of, we want to go over there and thrash evil. Like, that was the mentality. But when you did, and I can speak for Iraq, when you did get there and you saw the way they treated each other in some factions, and you couldn't engage with it. Like, there were certain things that the ROEs just did not allow you to engage with it. That is their culture. It was disgusting. There's different perspectives on how we see and treat children here versus the way children are treated in Iraq. But at the same token, what he's saying is not wrong. But there was also another element of people that did like us there and did appreciate us, and that did create like this weird. I thought everybody over here hated me and wanted me dead, and there are people over here that don't want us to even leave their little towns, their little areas. So you did get both. So at the very onset of crossing the line of departure, within just 2 to 3 weeks, you were really handed all these different emotions to deal with. So it does resonate with what he says, and I know it would probably take a whole book for him to document all the emotions, but it does resonate what he says. I hear what he's saying.
Ron, did you want to say anything?
Sure. I'll jump in here. It's interesting. A lot of you guys have experience that I don't. I served and was there in the first Gulf War, but I was at sea in the Navy, so I didn't get to see what a lot of you guys saw on the ground. And I know, I've talked to Alpha several times about things that he experienced, and I know, it's sadly the only thing that I can really take is either written accounts or things that Hollywood has produced. And the one thing that I think Hollywood did really fairly accurately was with Generation Kill. And there was a time when one of the Marines actually killed a young girl in a car, and the Marines were like in shock. He's like, why is he? What's wrong? Why isn't he like screaming because we just killed his daughter? And they said, and Candace says, we deal with death differently. And I think, and Alpha, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that a fairly accurate representation of, just in a microcosm of how they looked at death?
It depends, because what you're describing that's not uncommon to see, but it was also not uncommon to see them completely flip out, and then you were walking away with a great, this is gonna, there's an area known as the bull. This is gonna turn into another, days and days of fighting at the bull, because people aren't gonna understand this. So you had both extremes, and like I said, both were a shock to the conscious to you on that.
Yeah. Colonel Taylor or Colonel Burton, did you guys want to jump in there and share?
Hey, this is Colonel Burton. I need about 10 minutes to get checked into my hotel room, and then I'll pick back up with you. I'm listening though.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, so just jump in whenever you get a chance. Scott, did you want to add anything?
Yeah. Hey, this is Scott. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you for inviting.
Sure.
But thought we were really talking about readiness of the Army, the forces we have today, but how it's evolved. Did we want to talk about that?
We're going to. I just wanted to start off with his statement about the end result of this radicalization process, and him kind of explaining to America that people who are in the military that are doing it for the right reasons don't celebrate death. And I just think that's kind of prophetic from that perspective. So let me.
Well, to that point, Colonel, real quick, and I'll make it fast. A lot of us that joined, especially post 9/11, is because they went and we saw all those Americans that died. Regardless of what you believe the story is, we saw Americans die.
Correct.
And we didn't ever want that to happen on our homeland again. So you were willing to sign the contract, go to a foreign country to make the fight over there so that our families and our kids and our elderly would never see it. So you go over there, you see friends that are hurt, you see friends that are died, you see the things that change in your own life. A lot of those guys that are there were babies at the time. And you come back saying, I went through that sacrifice so that way here at home, we don't ever develop that kind of culture, to his point. And then you see that being celebrated here. And it's well, why the hell were we over there to begin with if you just were so willingly going to accept that kind of mindset here?
That's his point.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's his point exactly. So let's start talking about that. There's a really great article in the American Thinker that talks about the radical changes imposed on our military by progressives, that while it had happened prior to that with the misuse of military force in the forever wars and all that stuff, that's noted. But during the Obama administration, with the purging of senior officers, and there's 10 specific officers that we will get into at some point in the conversation tonight, and how they were gotten rid of. But during the Obama administration, the negative impact on combat readiness and the jeopardizing of lives of military people in uniform, there was a book written called Stand Down: How Social Justice Warriors Are Sabotaging America's Military. It was written by James Hassan, who was himself a Army Ranger captain that served in Afghanistan. And basically, he lists several specific examples, like the designation of safe spaces, which when that happened, I about died. The prohibition of microaggressions, the denigrating of hyper masculinity traits, the implementation of quote unquote green standards throughout the military, the injection of social justice as it related to military operations. And basically, because it changed everything, it changed the professional military education system and the way that basic training was ran. It permeated through the entire military. And it talks about progressive ideologues lacking military experience being placed in charge of the military, in charge of seasoned combat generals with decades of combat experience, and ignored every single one of their recommendations. The military became a laboratory for progressive social engineering, to include naming ships after socialist labor activists Cesar Chavez and Harvey Milk, who, for lots of reasons, should have never had anything named after him in the military. The mixed genitalia in the bathrooms, and he has a whole laundry list. So from you guys' experience, when you see such fundamental, basic cultural changes in something that is as steeped in tradition as the United States military, what's your opinion on the effect that that has on something like the US military?
Oh, can I talk about that?
Sure.
Now, I don't know how many of you were in the military before, the late 80s. When I joined in 1987, your drill sergeants were gods. And, if you screwed up, you could slip on a bar of soap in the middle of the woods, and that would be the, cause of your injuries if you screwed up. I've even seen, some wall-to-wall counseling, and nobody ever, was held accountable for that. And, I think the soldiers that, graduated, they benefited from it. But then it wasn't that long after that. I mean, I went through ROTC and everything else, but then when I get to the 101st at Fort Campbell, I start hearing about these stress cards. Do you guys remember stress cards?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, like, all right. But the difference is when you get to a unit, your leaders in there will make you a better soldier, make you better than you were when you come out of basic training. But then, as I recall along the way, there were things like, now you can't drop a soldier for doing push-up, to do push-ups when they screw up, which was an evaluation. I had a brigade commander who went on to be a 3-star named General Frakley, who the division commander at the time, and this is first cav. Frakley was the 3rd Brigade commander, and he went up to Sergeant Burns, or General Burns, the division commander, and said, "Okay, flare kicks." Right. So we had people still fighting for that at the time, to be able to maintain physical, correction. It's not that it's to strengthen soldiers, but it's not to strengthen their bodies, to strengthen their mind. That's the whole thing about physical discipline. It's that they don't want to be embarrassed in front of anyone else, and that's will keep them more than anything else from screwing up again. They don't want to be embarrassed. But then, when I was at Camp Airship, and when all this transgender things, were happening, we had, a male and a female latrine. This was, what year was this? 2015, 16. And, we were looking all over for who this was. He was like, suspect number 1. And my master sergeant, I was the deputy chief of operations at the time. And so my master sergeant got tasked by the our division, our 3rd Army Command Sergeant Major, to put up patrols and figure this out. And it turns out that it was, the guy who identified as transgender, and the company commander knew and never said anything. So it was like a goose chase for about 3 months. And so like that company commander didn't get much farther once they figured out the mystery, because she should have reported it as soon as she knew, because the women in her command even were, afraid to go to latrines because there might have been, anyway.
A man in the latrines. Benjamin, go ahead.
Thanks, Colonel. Hi, everyone. boot camp is many things. You know, for one, it's like you have to be able to handle stress. You know, that's part of the reason why it's set up the way it is. It's for one, it's an alchemical change. Once you go through boot camp, once you get out into the fleet, the course of your life is for.
What happened, Benjamin?
I'm not. He dropped off. I think I can kind of fill in the blank. So once you get into the fleet, I mean, it's a total life change. You know, military life is different from civilian life, and I'll tell you, you know, I could probably all the guys here probably, you know, there's a certain side of me that regrets getting out of the military after 3.5, 4 years. Because I look back on that time very fondly. I don't think I was too young to really truly appreciate what I was a part of at the time, and of course I was in the latter years of the Bush years. I got in '88 and got out in right at the end of '91. So anyway, it's I liked the military, but thankfully I didn't have to go through all the stuff that you guys did. But I remember when Clinton came in, I still knew a lot of guys that were in, and they had to deal with the don't ask, don't tell. Am I still on? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, but what we really want to focus on is how these changes radicalizes the people that are in the military that does not agree with these fundamental cultural changes being shoved down their throats.
Okay. Yeah, and I didn't experience that, so I don't know. But I saw the early stages of that with the don't ask, don't tell from guys that were that stayed in, and that I kept in contact with. And I know for an absolute fact they detested serving under Clinton. They detested it. So that's basically my contribution to this part.
Yeah.
So I'll let somebody else go.
Colonel Burton, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, thank you, Colonel Tanner Watkins. I appreciate the opportunity to come up. Thanks for holding the space. You know, I gotta say, it was almost like, you know, I served 30 years, 91 to 21, and it was almost like a slow boiling frog, I think is what I would call it, a very systematic campaign. And you look at it in terms of the way, especially once Obama got in there, that what they did they were just subtle changes. And I would say a culminating event was, I believe it was 2015, the last year of the Obama administration, and we were all issued a formal counseling sheet, one that you would typically give to an enlisted person in lieu of non-judicial punishment if they had done something wrong, but you didn't want to stop their career. However, you were going to document the counseling. And the counseling letter itself, and I'll have to go back through my record and pull it up, and I'll send it to you sometime so you could read it. I think you'd appreciate it as someone who's an expert in military administration.
Yes.
This counseling document was one that said, I understand and have been counseled on the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I was like, well, the rules are I don't have to sign this. They said, if you don't sign it, then the general officer has to sign up that you refuse to sign, you know. And I'm an 06 commander at the time that I end up signing my formal counseling letter, you know, provided to me by my sergeant major or senior enlisted advisor. And I'm just like, this is insanity. But it wasn't just so directly in your face, right? This was a compliance test, and I would put it as a precursor to, you know, the vaccine mandate and other things. So
what the fuck?
Right to the edge.
Are you kidding me?
No, not at all. Every single officer and enlisted person in the Marine Corps had to sign this acknowledgement of, I got to get to the great language, but it was basically you acknowledging diversity, equity, inclusion, and that there were oppressed peoples. And this is just the outright formal injection of that. And I winced at it naturally. But then, at the time, I'm like, dear Lord, okay, this makes no sense. And I told my senior enlisted advisor I wasn't going to sign the thing. He's like, then the general's got to sign a letter saying you didn't. It's just going to be a pain in his ass. And so it was a slow boiling frog over the course of those years, and the purges that had mentioned had taken place there, and we just started to not have senior general officers anymore that could recognize what was happening and push back against us, and they wouldn't. And they were I think there is a plan and a desire to destroy the United States of America from within, so that we can be brought into the one world globalist system. Well, that's the folks that Obama came from, and and the Bushes and many others, as you aptly in other spaces. So I think part of it was the demoralization of the United States military, because they don't believe and don't really care that we have the strongest military so much as they want to see amalgamated the equipment, the people, and people put in charge who will keep us under control for that one world system, in my opinion. But when I'm telling you, someone who experienced it, it only got worse from there. And I didn't really get to see it up close and personal until I went to Korea in 2018 and was the deputy commander for Marine Forces Korea. And then I ran into a guy named General Abrams, who was a 4-star, who had actually... he came to that position from Army personnel. And the big thing that he bragged about was all the things that he did to increase the roles for women in the military. And I don't think I'm in argument with you. There's some jobs that just need to be done by a man. However, he was, you could tell he had got himself into the good graces of the political establishment by being someone who was pushing that DEI vector, and those are the same folks who went full in on masking. And when it came time to poison the entire United States military, there was no one left there that had any critical thinking that could push back against it, because they had been groomed for their compliance, in my belief. Thank you.
And so the loyalty test, which I think is the perfect label for this DEI initiative that you're talking about. And for those of you who don't know, just the fact that it was a counseling, that's like a disciplinary action. The fact that they used that mechanism to mandate a full bird colonel sign this, it's like, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be very frank about this, it's like cutting your balls off. It is a total emasculation of someone who's in authority as a commander, basically cowing you to a system that fundamentally is against the Constitution. I'm dumbfounded by that. Because you go through.
It was a 6105 is what it was. So
yeah,
Marines in here will know what that is, and you avoided those.
Your entire career is right. Spent avoiding those, and to generically everybody, it's a total emasculation of the war fighter in you to be cowed to that level. That is I'm sorry, I'd never heard that story. Thank you for sharing that. That is, to me, just literally dumbfounding. Okay, Ron, go ahead.
Because I didn't serve, in the GWAT or anything like that, or under Obama, I literally, after your gracious invitation to participate in this, I did a Substack, and I think I shared it with you. It is long. I kind of went back, and I wanted to understand this so I could at least talk intelligently. And a lot of the things that the Colonel was saying there, I found a lot of people that were, that was kind of like part of the purges. It's like if you didn't cooperate, that was essentially you were getting purged. And but my understanding is, I remember when I was in '91 that we had to have like some sort of a sensitivity training session. I remember being down in San Diego, and the whole freaking ship, it was mandatory that we went to this big auditorium and we had to go through this sensitivity training. And I don't think it was as a result of Tailhook, but it was right around that time. I think it was a little bit before Tailhook. But, when I look back, just from a conspiratorial mind that I have, I'm looking at things as how they progressed. And Tailhook was probably the first thing that was really pushed onto everybody to get this thing going. And then you had the 94 thing that happened. It was 94. I think it was some lieutenant commander was doing some major thesis, and they talked about, hey, we'll use fire on American citizens if United Nations was taking control. And it was all about unit cohesion. So they were talking about all this stuff with unit cohesion. And it really didn't get to a boil until the latter part of the Bush administration, and then when Obama came in, it took off like a rocket. And I think the culmination of it was in 2015, and I shouldn't say culmination actually, because under Trump it stayed fairly benign. It didn't increase, but it didn't decrease. But it was the Marine Corps did a study of women in combat, and that was like that was one of the big things. But anyway, I don't mean to be rambling on, but I'm just looking at all this stuff and hearing what I'm like you, listening to him talk, listening to Colonel, I'm gobsmacked.
Now you know why I wanted him here. Josh, go ahead.
All right. Well, another Navy guy here. I was in 01 to 2011. Colonel, I've been written up to. I've been to 3 captain's masses, but we won't talk about my drunken stumpers in the U.S. Navy. Instead, we'll talk about kind of a few different things. Is number one, you guys were talking about boot camp, and one of the primary aspects of boot camp is to indoctrinate you into a system to where you respect authority and you follow authority. Because if you don't, people get hurt or people die. And I went through in 2001 in the aftermath of September 11th. And I will tell you that it was an eye-opening experience for me, and it definitely was not woke at that point in time. But then I went to a U.S. Navy ship, and I went through 4 different commanding officers on that ship. We primarily did narco deployment terrorism down in the South Pacific, did 1 Westpac. And you do see the cultural transition of COs and the different methodologies. But the one thing that we always had on that ship was this strict regiment of training and of following orders and not disobeying those orders. Because on a ship, whether people have been on them or not, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things that can kill you on a ship, even when you're not in battle or war. And so you have to pay close attention to detail and follow standard operating procedures. It really changed for me when I got to Washington, D.C., which was my shore duty station. I was stationed at the Washington Navy Yard in 2008. I got there in January 2008, so it was right at I went to Bush's farewell ceremony, and then I worked Obama's inauguration because I was a military police officer at the Washington Navy Yard. Coming from San Diego, a seasoned sailor, going to shore duty, I got there and I started seeing massive amounts of problems with my command, and my command didn't really like me saying anything about it. And a lot of the problems, and I'll express them here, we operated on the U.S. The Navy Yard with civilian law enforcement, LEO, federal LEO, and we had a lieutenant that was about 380 pounds, a fat piece of shit who could barely make it up the stairs, so he used a cane to take the elevator. The majority of these people had no clue about any standardized training. They were lackadaisical. We had a gentleman, we were by Berry Farms in Washington, D.C., which is one of the most gang-ridden areas in the country. And the gentleman got shot in the chest on Friday night, begged for help for 4 hours in front of a camera by the back gate. Our patrol car went by him 7 different times the entire weekend, and they didn't find him until Monday. So when you start talking about attention to detail and stuff like that, this is what I was witnessing when I was there, and this was in 2008. And I eventually, they pushed me out through a reduction in rate, a reduction in force in 2010, 2011. I mean, probably because I was very outspoken about these things and the standardized of, hey, we need to keep our people in tip-top shape in case it happens, and people don't know. In 2013, the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C. had an active shooter situation where a few people died. And I know the people who responded to that, and the majority of them weren't ready because they didn't have the proper training for that type of situation. And when they would go through training on that base, it was laughing and high fives and fake guns and no real world situational awareness. So I think that what we've seen culturally in the military with this woke indoctrination is really an emasculation of the soldier, is taking away their power and authority. Number one, to look at what's happening. Number two is taking away their idea that they're serving the United States Constitution and the people of the United States of America. For many of these kids, it's just a job. For many of these kids, they don't care what happens next. They don't care about any punishment of a slap on the wrist, or they're going to be put in timeout, or going to have to go to this, this little room and cool off for a little while because they spoke out against somebody's orders. It's all about that, because in the wars that come in this country, what's going to win it is people who do their job, do it well, and take orders appropriately from people who know better. And when we start to look at what's happening right now, or what happened in our military, that whole infrastructure was being dismantled.
Yeah, I agree.
Real quick before you carry on, Colonel, because I know me and CanCon are going to have to leave here in just a few, and I want to get his take on this. I'm hearing these stories, and I'm hearing these stories from people I know in the military now, but during my time, granted it was, Marine infantry, all this was absent to me. Like, we were dialed in. It was strict. I mean, you did not want to be the guy that had a shitty PFT score, like it was. And I'm curious if CanCon had the same experience, because, he was on the East Coast. I was on the West Coast. He went to Afghanistan. I went to Iraq. But the culture I'm hearing, at least in the infantry side of the Marine Corps, it seemed like that was absent. At least I didn't see it, or maybe I missed it, and that's why I'm curious if CanCon did.
No, I mean, I think the infantry is a lot different than just about any other MOS outside of like maybe special forces or other combat MOSs. But when I was in the infantry, like, if you were a fat body piece of shit, they told you you're a fat body piece of shit, and they would never let you forget that. And when I got out, so I got out in 2012, and one of the things that really pissed me off when I got out is I had an injury to my shoulder and had to have surgery. And this is when the Marine Corps was going from 212,000 down to like 188,000 or something like that. And I was a 300 PFTer. I was squared away, no NJPs, no page 11s, nothing. And when it came time for me to re-enlist, I had to do, my minimum physical requirements, which was kind of crazy to me because I was on light duty for, recovering from my surgery and everything. And the reason I bring that up is because I wanted to re-enlist. I actually wanted to go MARSOC at the time. And meanwhile, you look at some of the guys that I see that were allowed to re-enlist, that were given the opportunity, and you got a lot of the less than stellar Marines. They turned out to get their shit together. But when you fast forward to where we're at today with the military, one of the things I like about Hegseth is I read his book, and it changed my opinion on him. The War Against the Warfighter, I think that's what it's called, something like that. And he's well aware of the situation that we're facing right now with the social equity and the social justice and all that shit. The problem is that you have a situation now where, the military is trying to do their thing to clean this all up, and the courts are not allowing them to. So I don't know where this case is at right now, but I remember the last thing I had heard about, the transgender ban was a judge saying, no, you can't do that. Meanwhile, the only reason that the transgender ban, the only reason that the transgender members were able to serve in the first place was because of not an executive order from Obama, but an executive order from I can't remember who the hell the Secretary of Defense was under him.
Austin.
No, not under Biden, under Obama.
Oh.
I can't remember who the hell his name was, but he was the one that basically issued the order that allows transgenders to serve. So now, here we are in 2024, 2025, and we're trying to reverse that. And the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, is being told by the courts that he doesn't have the authority to overturn a decision that was made by the Secretary of Defense. So the whole point of me saying that is because I believe that the leadership that's currently in place understands how off track the military's gotten. And you could go back to the old adage of, strong men create good times create weak men create bad times create strong men. We're, kind of in the middle of that cycle right now where we have even though our recruiting numbers are way up, we still have a lot of craziness to root out of our military.
So it was Robert Gates. It was Robert Gates or Ashton Carter.
It was Ashton Carter, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, obviously, the lawfare that is going on is a judicial coup against a sitting president. For all the reasons you just articulated. And thank you for adding that, CanCon. Benjamin, go ahead.
Thanks, Colonel. I was in from 99 to 2019. The standards are the standards. A military is not always going to be the same military. The Roman military wasn't always the same. The United States military is not always going to be the same. I want the best of the best to be in there, and it's different. It's a different world. Our standards are much higher. It's a much quicker speed than civilians are used to. Like one of the things I enjoyed was having families come on board and riding in the last day when we were about ready to pull into port after a deployment. They got to see, what it looked like through our eyes. After when you first get in, it's like, wow, this is so amazing. I can't believe it. But after a while, it's like, it's okay. But the standards are the standards, and boot camp and all these things, that there's reasons why we do the things that we do in the military, and it's for very good reason. We don't want a bunch of egotistical people. It's about the best and the brightest. It isn't about race, color, gender, creed. But at the same time, I do believe a lot of women should not be holding certain positions, especially in the infantry, especially in special forces. A lot of the team guys, they would complain. If you get captured, they may rape you, and it's like
women should not be in combat, period.
I agree with you, Colonel. It's like that would tear me up.
It's a complete upside down bullshit narrative that the men's natural instinct is to protect women. You break down the integrity of any combat unit by putting women in it. That's just it. Period.
I'm going to land there. I'll get back in there, Colonel.
Okay. Yeah. And
can I address that real quick? Because I thought about this. I actually put this in my Substack, and I did a personal note about this. You're right. It's men not wanting women to be in combat is not a chauvinistic thing. It's more of a man protecting a woman thing, because the things that happen in combat, and thank God I never had to experience this, but the things that happen in combat are barbaric, horrific. I mean, beyond measure. And no man wants to allow a woman, regardless of how much she thinks she wants it, no man wants to even allow a woman to have to experience anything like that. And I think that's the ultimate source, the height of desire to protect our mothers or daughters and sisters.
Well, so, I don't even know that it's the horror aspect of it, because obviously women are doctors. They're exposed to horrific things and injuries and all of that stuff. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the cohesiveness of a unit in combat. Because your natural instinct as a man is looking over your shoulder to where she's at. It really isn't even a psychological thing. As a matter of fact, of most normal men, not military, I would say that I'm much better around the gory, non-emotional aspects of coming up upon a car wreck and not being put off by rushing in to save someone. It has nothing to do with that. To me, it has everything to do with combat readiness. It's whether or not you can think that of a 10-man unit all going in with the same objectives to do the exact same thing, that at least 9, if one of them's a woman, is not going to be paying extra attention to that, because it's in your DNA. It is everything about combat readiness. Colonel,
I have something to add when you're done, Colonel.
Sure, go ahead. Then I want to hear from Colonel Burton. Colonel Burton too.
Colonel, I gotta dip out here to get SITREP ready, but thank you so much for having me. Also, I'll see you in like 20 minutes when you get wrapped up.
Thanks, CanCon.
All right, take care.
So, do you all remember the first female officer that graduated Ranger School?
Yes.
This would have been back in 2014. And I forget her name, but I know the command sergeant major of the 4th RTB, because he was my battalion command sergeant major. His name was Curtis Arnold. And so I happened to be down there at Fort Benning in September, right after he took, command, or took the command sergeant major position. And so we talked about the girl, she was a lieutenant that was going through, I think she might have been a captain, but, she was a stud, and was able to do most of, the physical things. But what, Curtis told me was, a part of it was the way she graduated is because she got a lot of help from the other Rangers.
Yep.
And that's the Ranger creed, never leave a fallen soldier.
Yeah.
And, but she was, physically really broken down afterwards, because, she was a stud as a female, but it's not something that most could do. And you are right about that. So this ties right into what you were saying, is that the men are looking after the women in combat, just like the other Rangers students looked after her. And so...
And if you are assigned a mission that requires 10 soldiers, and you're actually operating with 9.5, you endanger the entire mission.
Exactly.
Yeah. Colonel Burton, did you want to add anything? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, you probably had this same discussion with young troops and my young Marines, and I got them together, and we had, we're on a training squadron, or responsible for a training squadron, and we had lots of females in there, and I just kind of told everybody, I said, no one joined the military to fall in love. At least that's not why I hoped you did. However, you've got men and women, especially when you deploy overseas, high stress environments, life is on the line, all that. Now you come up with a ton of issues. done.
We're losing you a little bit.
People there.
You were breaking up a little bit. Sorry about that.
Sorry, can you?
Yeah, you're good now. You're good now.
Okay. So like I said, I believe this was done. The expansion to combat roles, the expansion of, some would say opportunities, but it's also an opportunity to destroy people and put them in positions where they're going to necessarily require more resources and extra help to get different things done. Infantry obviously being one of those roles. And I do believe it was done with malice and intent, and I believe they were able to do it because the culling and grooming of the military leadership over several generations. You just would not get promoted if you spoke out and said, hey, this is a bad idea. It doesn't make you even pass even common sense. There's no reason to do a study. We know, right? So if you were one of those people, you just were retired or waited out until they could groom up people in there who would not push back against that system. And if we do find ourselves in a fight where the elites are scared and are worried about their own survival in our country, and we do get into combat, I think you will see those. It'll be like World War II. They'll fire 3/4 of the generals and lieutenant colonels that were hard will be recognized very quickly, and they'll come up. And the policy changes that those people will bring in, they'll have to, and they're not going to put up with anything. Hopefully, it doesn't come to that.
Hopefully it doesn't come to that. I agree. And to your point, let me just share with you guys. There are women, by the way, who join the military just to find a husband. I experience that quite often. And to other women, they will tell you that. You guys know that when I joined the military, the only thing that I wanted to do was work on airplanes. I wanted to be an aircraft mechanic. And when I was reassigned to the training school, which was about a year after they allowed women to be in aircraft maintenance in the Air Force, they almost, in verbal, they would never put it in writing. They would tell you that you basically had to graduate every female student in order to fill the aircraft maintenance positions out in the field. Now, I had been in the field and I knew that the graduates that was coming out of the school that were female, that they were just allowing to graduate. They didn't know a wrench from a hammer. Would get into a squadron, and I was at a SAC base. We worked on KC-135s, which is part of our strategic bomber capability. So we worked 24 hours a day, and they could not even pick up a 70-pound toolbox, which is what our toolbox weighed. And when they were dismal failures at doing anything to include the simplest of tasks, they would assign them to work at the snack bar in the squadron. And what most people don't realize is you're always undermanned on the flight line, always. And so they're taking up an aircraft maintenance mechanic billet, working at a snack bar, when that meant that people like me, who actually could work for a living, had to put in excessively long hours covering up for the normal manning shortfall, but then someone sitting on the books as a maintenance troop that didn't even know the difference between wrenches. And that pissed me off to no end. So any favor that you think you're doing, it breeds disgruntled, aggravated, and it breeds hatred towards females. You are not doing females any favors by doing that to them, because that type of policy is exactly what the topic is. It's radicalization of people inside the military when you force feed them bullshit, because every enlisted person knows that it's bullshit.
Well, not only that, Colonel.
Hold on, Ron. Ron, hold on. Ron, hold on. Let Benjamin go. He's got his hand up.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Benjamin.
Thank you. Well, like every time before deployment, any naval vessel, you have women get pregnant. You know, a lot of them, they're like, I don't feel like doing a 6-month or a 12-month deployment, so they'll get pregnant. And then you're about ready to go on, it's gone. Like everybody has to go through and juggle things to try to fill that gap. And when you're talking like 10 and 20 and 30 females all getting pregnant and being lost at the same time, you know, so there's a lot that goes into it, because like train a lot. One thing you be as a firefighter, you know, and you got to be able to lug that stuff around. Like in 2001, while we were in the Gulf, you know, we had a main space fire. You're talking 3,000 degrees. You know, like you got grown men that were scared to go in there. You know, and a lot of these ladies, they're ladies. They don't have any, you know, umph in them. You know, that they're not ready to fight. You know, and it's like I went to captain's mast 8 times. You know, so it's all those times I went to captain's mast except for one was because I got caught in the female birthing. You know, it's like that's going to happen while you're on deployment, while you're in port. You know, it really does affect readiness to a very high degree.
It certainly does. Absolutely. So let's move on real quick to, I wanted to get this part in because it goes to what Colonel Burton was just talking about.
Colonel, can I just tack on, because you said something that I wanted to address just real quick. I promise I'll be brief.
Okay.
But what you're talking about was when you put a woman into a situation where now you guys have to, where the men are short-staffed and they have to pick up the slack. It exhausts them, and it actually depletes their ability to be for readiness. So
it wasn't just men, though. I mean, there were other competent women in aircraft maintenance that vilified the ones that came in there to work at the snack bar.
Well, I'm just saying that when anytime that you have a weak link, it depletes the strong links.
And I know that's what I said.
Links you have, the weaker it gets.
But it actually radicalizes people. It in the unit. It in unit cohesiveness from a readiness perspective. It drives wedges into it, and it demoralizes your troops when your job as an officer is to keep the morale up. And there's literally, and their hands were tied because higher ups didn't want to discharge so when I got to the schoolhouse, not one of those bitches graduated. I did all of the paperwork. There was the entire time I was there for 3 years, not one of them that could not pick up that toolbox ever went to a flight line. And I had a female colonel, group commander, that was on my ass all the time. And I said, I don't care. They're not going to the flight line. I was out there. I know what it does to the squadron. But for people who stand up, your life is made miserable. But because I was another female, I at least didn't get slapped with oh, you know, you're being prejudiced or you're being a chauvinist or whatever. So anyway, speaking of which, let's move on to this was my last topic, and that was the purge under Obama. I wanted to go through the top 10 commanders that was purged. Obviously, General Flynn was fired for not lying in congressional testimony when he was the DIA commander. You also have General Carter Ham, who was in the Army, and he was one of the people that testified in front of Congress that senior military officers he was one of the senior military officers that was vocally critical of the Obama's administration in Benghazi. He testified that those people could have been saved and basically was made to resign and retire in 2013 for speaking out about it. Rear Admiral Charles, and I don't know how you say his last name, Gauette. He was the Navy commander of Carrier Strike Group 3 for U.S. Central Command. He was on duty the night of Benghazi, and he told Congress that there may not have been, under testimony, he told Congress there may not have been enough time to get flight crews to Benghazi, but he left the door open when he told Trey Gowdy under cross-examination that he could have launched aircraft and at least hope to rescue them. And later on, he was accused of using profanity and then making insensitive comments. And basically, he was faced with administrative process, so he retired. So, in other words, they got rid of him too. Major General Ralph Baker, Army, served as the commander of Joint Task Force Horn at Camp Lamar in Djibouti, Africa. He had, and you're going to find this a common theme here, he had someone make sexual misconduct allegations against him, and nothing was ever filed. There was nothing in his nothing ever happened with it. It was an accusation to demean him so that they could get him to retire. Brigadier General Brian Roberts, Army. He was in charge of Fort Jackson. He was considered a rising star, having served in Iraq, commanding the 2nd Brigade Combat Team. Deputy Commander General of Army Recruiting Command at Fort Knox. He was relieved of duty and fired for adultery. There was no charges ever filed. Major General Greg Sturbenvant. Is that how you say that, Colonel Burton? Sturdevant.
That's General Sturdevant, and he was fired, and it was for cause because he was, I believe, properly fired because he was the commander at Camp Lebanon. If you remember, when we lost 6 Harriers in a jihadi attack where they got on the flight line and we had to run CAS, close air support, on our own flight line. And that was the smallest story, most swept under the rug, that all of you should read a book on, but apparently you can't get a book on it published because we lost 6 Harriers in one night. We were fighting. The squadron commander was killed with a pistol in his hand because he went out there with a pistol to try to take on the jihadis with an AK-47 and was shot down. And we ended up having to launch helicopters from the other side of the base, and we were running an active combat CAS mission on the flight line in Leatherneck. And he was responsible for the force protection and not being active enough in his patrols to protect the base.
And that was Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Rabel and Sergeant Bradley Atwell.
That's correct, yes.
That we lost
that day, and we lost six AV-8B Harriers. I mean, and I was at Air War College at the time when this happened. I was like, oh, this is going to blow up. This is going to be huge. And because it was Obama, they swept it under the rug. I mean, they just covered everybody's butts at the time and then quietly held him accountable later. But that should have been a news story for the ages, and it died quicker than Building 7.
Wow, I had never heard that story. You lost six aircraft?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
these were just coked up. These were, I would say, coked up. They're whatever method of methamphetamine these jihadis were taking. They just waltzed right through the wire. They went in, cut the wire. Had them on video. Later because no one was watching the actual surveillance, but they just walked right in, cut the wire, and about, I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was 6 to 12. It was a good squad size element came through, and they just started walking through and just put a grenade in each of 6 Harriers that were on the flight line.
Holy shit!
Wow, I've never heard that story.
Yeah, Major General Charles Gurganis. Do you know about that one, Colonel Burton?
I don't know why they fired General Gurganis, and he was a hardcore Marine. He did not take any crap, so I do believe that is part of the purging because he was everyone knew his opinion. If you were around General Gaines, if you were on his base, you knew his opinion. I'll put it that way.
Probably toxic masculinity. That's why they fired him.
Well,
oh yeah, if you look up the definition, he's going to be right there next to Chesty Puller.
Yeah. Lieutenant General David Holmes Houghton Jr., Huntoon Jr., Army. He was the 58th superintendent of the military academy at West Point. Graduated there. He was censored for an investigation into an improper relationship, according to the Department of Defense, but no charges were ever filed. Vice Admiral Tim Gagarian, Navy, Deputy Commander of the United States Stratcom. He was commander of a submarine group, Trident, and he was under investigation for some type of informal poker game. The whole story about him was bizarre. Major General Michael Carey, Air Force. He was the commander of 20th Air Force, and he was fired for a reason that was never released. It was categorized in a news report as personal misbehavior, which could literally be anything. So that's kind of the top. There were many more, but that's kind of the top of the barrel of the senior officer purges. And other than the one, the rest of them seems to be very sketchy as far as being relieved. And of course, like we said, General Flynn's was probably the most sketchiest at all, just because he simply refused to lie in congressional testimony and say what he actually thought. So, any comments about that topic from the speakers?
The one. I'm sorry. Let me add something to Gurganus. I'm gonna have to go back to look. He may have been the meth commander in that when that event happened. So I need to go back and look at that. He may have been caught up in that event. I don't think he was on the ground there, but it may have been his responsibility, even though he would have likely been in Camp Pendleton at the time. I'm going to have to go back and look at that. So they'll concur with the list.
Okay. Benjamin, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add one. I don't know if you guys remember back in 2020 that Navy captain that got relieved of his command on the carrier because of the whole COVID vaccinations and everything. He wouldn't make it mandatory, and there was some other stuff, but he got fired, and then there was a big swell of support for him, so they brought him back in because the crew loved him. He was looking out for him. He was one of those leaders that sailors love to work for, just like many of you have served with, like those are the ones you do anything for and you go to war with.
Yeah, and to your point, Colonel Burton, he was retired in 2013, which is the year after that incident. So you're right, he may have been caught up in that.
Yeah, there you go.
Anyone else on that? Glad you can make it, Colonel Kirk.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for having me. Sorry I'm late.
Sure.
Got tied up at the center, but all is good. So glad to be here.
Okay. So probably the last thing that we will close on is this is an article from the I don't know if you guys follow this, but it's called The Trumpet. It does a lot of military stuff. It's talking about the DoD instruction that Austin signed in, saying that it was a quote unquote refinement of previous orders. Austin ordered a worldwide stand down of forces so leaders can discuss the new policies of extremism with all service members. The policy states that banned activities include advocating terrorism or supporting the overthrow of the government, to fundraising or rallies on behalf of extremist groups, or even liking or reposting what is they deem to be an extremist view on social media. It goes on. Service members' social media activity will now be monitored. The Department of Defense said it does not intend to actively be monitoring specific accounts unless there's a complaint. The rules are unclear on what constitutes extremist views. In my opinion, that was on purpose. But based on leadership's past actions and their view of the January 6th event as extremist, these rules target anyone who questions election integrity. It would apply to all supporters of Donald Trump and legitimacy of the Joe Biden's presidency. The rules do not list any extremist organizations as examples and leaves it to the discretion of commanders to determine if a service member participated in extremist activity. And of course, that was, several years ago. And then the immediate outrage of everybody when the Secretary of War basically says that he doesn't condone people celebrating the assassination of someone and that he deems that's extremist. But the previous Secretary of Defense believed that even if you, as a service member, called into question the integrity of an election, you were designated as an extremist, or if you identified as MAGA, you were an extremist. Go ahead, Colonel Burton.
All right, I think you've heard enough of my story to know that this was actually the Colonel Burton policy memo that was written in 2021 for the coup that happened in 2019. I was very vocal and also Obama created all of those rules for us where we could go right up to the edge of what you could do politically. And so
we lost you. There you go.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I literally did. I would post on social media especially in the interim from November 3rd, when they rigged the election. We had a coup until they certified the coup. And then I was actually physically there on January 6th watching. I know I couldn't participate, but I could watch. And that's what I did. I sat there and I just sat back and I watched everything that went on that day. And I knew that it was a coup. I saw the FBI agents moving barriers. I saw those things. And the next day, on January 7th, I came in and I put in my retirement paperwork because I'd lost my moral authority to stand over caskets in the middle of the night because we just went through a rigged election and the entire political class was clearly going along with it. So it was a coup. And so I had posted all these things. I knew it. And I had said, this is, not my official capacity because even though I had a personal account, everyone knows you're a colonel kind of thing. I was like, this doesn't reflect DOD policy, statements are all my own. They gave that to us. That's what Obama did. Why? Because he wanted radicals out there doing these things. So I was going right up to the edge of what the rules were and operating within them. So much so that the FBI came to arrest me in the Pentagon. And I'm told this, I don't know this, but I'm told this, that the commandant told them no. And the reason I think he told them no, because if they did arrest me, the Joe Biden coup would have been exposed because then they would have thrown my ass in jail and they would have had a colonel in jail who's saying the election was rigged when everyone in the country knows the election was rigged. We had a coup, right?
Yes.
So anyway, I was hammered. I basically said, okay, I'm off of social media now because there's no point. The Congress just certified this. We are screwed. We're going to have to deal with whatever this is. And then and there was an investigation and all that, but you know, I was cleared in it, except for one thing. There was one thing where they said it was inappropriate for me to do, and that's when I mentioned the fact that Ratcliffe, you know who Ratcliffe is now, CIA director.
Yes.
Well, at the time, he was the DNI, and
Yep.
in December, he said the Chinese Communist Party has infiltrated every institution in the United States. And what I said was, I can't. All this is in my unofficial capacity, but based on and I said this, and based on the DNI statement, I can say in my official capacity that the Chinese Communist Party has infiltrated the entire United States. And that was the one thing that the Marine Corps put on my record, to, you know, as an actual counseling. I got counseled as a colonel, with 30 years service, 5 combat deployments, for stating exactly what the DNI said. And I said I could say it in my official capacity. Why? Because the director of national intelligence actually said that.
Yep.
And then I felt hunted every time the memo came out. I go, this is my memo. They're writing this memo for me, right? I'm the guy who's paying attention to everything that's going on right now. I'm like, bullshit. And where they finally got me, and I had to get out, and I had to get out quick because my stepmother was murdered by the Moderna vaccine in August of 2021. 3 weeks after she took her second shot, she was dead. And I then showed up. I saw that memorandum. It was there, and I was like, I can't do this. This is going to kill me. I mean, I think this is who they're physically trying to kill. So I put in a return paperwork and got out. And you know this as a colonel, I got out within 90 days to avoid the vaccine, which are military. And I'm still so pissed at so many of those general officers. I had plenty of jobs I could take in the defense industry. I can't be around them until we get this squared away, and I don't want to be around them.
I 100% agree. Yeah. And I understand that completely. Okay. Ron, and then I want to open it up. I don't want to keep everybody too late. I appreciate everybody's time. If you can be really quick, there's a couple of people that want to ask some questions. So.
Absolutely. I just wanted to, you know, in my research for the Substack that I put up, one of the things that just shocked me to my core was immediately after Biden took office, they implemented a policy where essentially what they did was they put DEI officers at every command. And I couldn't help but think that was no different than freaking a political officer in the Soviet Union. At every command level, and when they standardized training with this DEI and they put it out there, I mean, I was just horrified. I was like, what? I didn't know this until, I mean, I thank you for inviting me tonight, because my eyes, I had to literally pick my eyes up off my desk because they just kept falling out. So,
yeah. Well, we knew that they had the DEIs there because that's where all of the pride parades, like on the Air Force bases, that kept getting turned in. They had drag queen happy hour at the O Club out in Las Vegas. At the fighter weapons school, the most manliest man thing in the entire Air Force had a drag queen happy hour at the O Club. All courtesy of the DEI agents. Zen, go ahead.
Yeah, Colonel, I just sent you some information. I looked up that attack on the base with the 6 Harriers being lost. A book was just released in 24 called Triumph Over the Taliban. And they were dressed up in U.S. Army uniforms. There was 15 of them. And Prince Harry was on the base at the time. And I sent you some information if you want to post it. I did a grok thing on it, so you can post it down.
Did you want to address that, Colonel Burton?
Well, I don't really have anything other than to say what I've seen, and I've seen the video of the entire attack, watched it, and saw it go down. I don't doubt, given what we know about Gladio and the depravity of our political class, that there was wasn't some other thing going on there. And obviously Prince Harry being on the base was kind of a big deal. And I think it was kind of cool that we had, actually, royals that put their skin and blood and life and line on the line. But look, at the end of the day, like I was part of, in 2014 when I had a UAV squadron, we found the largest stash of heroin ever there. And I believe what we were actually doing at a level that was, 3, 4, 5 levels up from where I was as an operator, that we're basically taking control of the global opium trade. I mean, I think
100%. 100%.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that's very interesting that you say that, because obviously, and I try to make this point every time we just did the entire book about Colombia. People ask me all the time, because obviously SOF and a lot of the Green Berets and stuff like that are down in these countries under the auspices of training people to go after the narcos. And in reality, what they were doing was training paramilitary people to go after the citizens that were resisting the narcos. And people ask me all the time, well, how do they not know that? How would you answer that, Colonel Burton?
I'll tell you, it's because of our we're born into a world, and we have observations that are there, and a very, in many cases, good and thing that we actually buy into. Right, we put our lives on the line to serve the country. We believe in the United States Constitution. What I think the issue is that and it's so great. I hope I'm waking up in time, and I think this great awakening is happening, is that our elites have been trying to manipulate that, going back, since the day after our founding, right? They came up with a constitution. I think the Constitution is divinely inspired. I do think this is a spiritual battle that we're in, and I think that those men and women that founded this country were doing everything they could to separate themselves from what I would describe, and I think most of you now, knowing what you know, can only describe as pure evil. And that's they tried their best, and so far we're still there. Hopefully, we make it to 250, and we can make it beyond that. But it's going to take people doing uncomfortable things. For whatever reason, they were able to make me comfortable for 30 years, landing on aircraft carriers at night, doing 5 combat deployments, doing these things, and I was all in, right? And I was good, damn good at all of that. However, it was all based on a principle that the people 2 or 3 levels above me were completely manipulating, and I think that's where the battle is right now. So again, and it is one of the, and I'll shut up, but the one point I want to have everyone understand with this, at least so you know where I'm coming from. I'm now 100% convinced we are in a spiritual battle, that this is good versus evil, because the things we're seeing, the DEI and the other things, you can tie those to the spiritual realm with Baphomet and transgenderism and the child sacrifices and all those things. I'm not going to make it a conspiracy theory space, because we're dealing with facts and things that happen today and happen. However, just realize, I believe, a layer above you in your room right now, the spiritual battle that's going on. Thank you.
Sure. And the point that I want to make, to Colonel Burton's point, is the military is operating off of generally CIA crafted intel. CIA does not actually gain intelligence by observation and a legitimate portrayal of what's happening on the ground. They actually craft intelligence to manipulate the military commanders on the ground to do what they want them to do. And no one in the military, and I can attest this, and Colonel Burton can as well, and we'll hear from Colonel Kirk in just a second. No one in the military, because you wouldn't be there the next day. if you, as a military officer, as Colonel Burton just said, is the reason why he got out, when you lose faith in your country and your country's ability to do the right thing, you resign your commission the next day. If any officer who would have a second thought that the CIA was illegitimate, they wouldn't be able to stay in the military, because then they would be taking part in, as what he just observed, the actual perpetuation of the opium industry and not the eradication of it. So when you think you're there, not only eradicating radical Islamist terrorists that we find out after the fact that we created with the CIA, but also eradicating potential heroin coming into the United States. Your mission is noble, and you're fed that intelligence for that noble mission. And the CIA knows that, which is why they generate that intelligence. And then we go off and put our lives in harm's way in the protection of our country, only to find out years later that a significant part of that narrative is completely false. And that, in and of itself, is a potential radicalization effort too, because for some people who did not come back whole, or lost their best friend, or seen things that they have trouble dealing with every day, to find out that it was all based on a lie will be devastating. Go ahead, Colonel Kirk.
Well, I can't emphasize enough how much I agree with what you just said, and I think my story is an example of that. And I just want to echo Colonel Burton's comments. Absolutely, 1,000,000% agree with that assessment, especially the good versus evil part in the spiritual battle. For me, I was in the Air Force for 25 years, and I was in influence operations, which, for those who don't know, it means you have one job, which is your J job, but you really get instructions outside the chain of command to do other things from time to time, and kind of made a career out of being effective at that, but ended up being the speechwriter for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mullen, during the Obama administration. I was in the room when he and General Petraeus, and there was a large effort to develop a program called the Afghan Hands Program. And when General McChrystal kind of drafted the outline for that program, I wrote that for Admiral Mullen, and then Admiral Mullen said he wanted to encourage the services to send their best and brightest, and so he wanted to know if I was interested in going and being a part of that program. And I had just written the letters of condolence for the insider mass shooting event that took the lives of those great Americans. And of course, I was fired up to go. So I went with a few special conditions. They were open-ended orders. I was to be there for the duration of the war, and was also embedded with the Afghan army for a time in order to specialize in the languages of Afghanistan at a street level. And so when I hit the deck in Afghanistan in 2010, General McChrystal sat down with us and said, "I fully expect you to be beheaded on YouTube. One or two of you don't care. Here's your orders are to figure out what's going on, why we're not winning, and what we need to do to win. And you report back to me on this." And for me, I was also reporting back to Admiral Mullen on it as well, and spent months integrating into Afghan society, living, working downtown, working with Afghan agencies, but mostly within Afghan civil society, and quickly learned the truth. And it was amazing to me how many of the Afghan people already understood the truth about what was going on with the narcotics trade, the CIA, and complicity with that. And the problem was that I reported that up the chain, and that's where I ultimately became a victim of the deep state in that process, because they didn't want that going to Admiral Mullen, certainly, but we all saw what happened to General McChrystal. That was a product that a lot more to the story there. I won't waste everybody's time, but suffice it to say he was a casualty as well. And then I believe he was subsequently to a certain degree, compromised by that effort as well, which is why we've seen some of his later work. But was there for the Camp Bastion event, and can tell you everything that I saw from the ground level there and what that was. But again, that was absolutely not as advertised. And what Colonel Towner said was exactly what happened to me. Through the process of discovering all this, we found Afghan National Security Forces moving narcotics using their aircraft that we were using. My best friend was the head of advisors for our effort training them, and we worked together to cut off their gas so that they wouldn't be able to do that anymore. And 2 days later, he was murdered, and along with 7 other people from his team, and one other service member was murdered in that event. And then we lied to their families. The DOD lied to their families as to what was going on and why they were killed. They tried to make it look like this guy had radicalized and had become a Muslim extremist, and that's why he killed our guys, when it was not that. I want to be careful not to get into classified, but the bottom line is I saw the writing on the wall at that point, that we lied to family members about guys doing the right thing and standing up against what at the time we could see was blatant corruption. And so that's when I dropped my papers to get out, and simply lost all faith and confidence and raged against the machine for the little time that I had left. But all of it, I think, exemplifies the truth of what you're saying, that we just got too close to reality there in Afghanistan, saw what was going on. And then the oddity was I was assigned to AFRICOM after that, and was there for Benghazi and led the effort to get the guys who executed Benghazi. So lots to talk about as well, all of which supports that conclusion. Nothing was against it. So I just want to echo your thoughts on that. That's when I got out. I saw the same thing, and my brothers and sisters are dead as a result of it. And I stand unequivocally against it, and unequivocally with you guys, Colonel Burton, especially with your story. You're absolutely spot on, and I'm with you. Over.
Okay. Reaper Kitty, go ahead, and then we'll go to Ron.
I was just coming up. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, you guys, I had to change my microphone setting. I just came up to tell you guys that drug that they were on was called Captagon.
Okay, thank you. Ron, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, it sounds like Colonel Kirk realized that he kind of got the red pill on active duty. And I guess my question for the other panel members is, I didn't red pill, basically knowing what was, kind of the really going on until 2004. How many of you guys saw things that make you go, and then got out, just like Colonel Kirk? I mean, was it stuff that you saw on duty, or was it stuff that you saw afterwards that made you think, oh my God, that makes so much sense now? Well, I guess that's my question.
Well, obviously, Colonel Burton had it happen to him while he was on active duty. Correct, Colonel Burton?
Yeah. For me, it was actually witnessing all of January 6th. My wife and I, we were like, this is we're either going to save the Republic or we're going to go in despotism right now. And so, and I was on active duty. I couldn't participate, and I didn't. But I went down there and I listened to President Trump speak, and then I watched and I saw, our guy with the horns there. I saw people saying, "This is our Reichstag moment," and I walked up Pennsylvania Avenue, and then we went to the Capitol. As we walked up to the Capitol, there were all these barriers. We had seen them because we had to walk past it to get there. Our home was 3 blocks off of Capitol Hill, and we lived on 4th and H at the time. And so we had walked by there, and there were all these signs up and everything else. But all that had changed when we got back up there. All the signs were gone. the barriers were being moved. And what really got me was there was this really clean-cut dude who I'm just convinced in my soul as an FBI agent. He was moving the barriers, and he set up a fish trap to funnel people into the Senate side of the Capitol. And if you've ever been up there, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Supreme Court's right there, that side of it. And I was like, holy cow, this guy's really put together. And then I started recognizing these things. I never had this in my life because I'm a fighter pilot, right? It's like, hey, we have to create a fighter pilot, you have to put a ton of infrastructure around them. People like Colonel Tanner Watkins are doing admin and crushing it with maintenance and everything else. And so we live a little bit of a gilded life to get into that elite sphere, but you have to be willing to die and fight, and it's dangerous, right? So landing on aircraft carriers, night, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so now I'm looking at this, and I've been through Afghanistan, I've been through these things, and I was seeing in my own country something I hadn't seen before, which were crisis actors. And immediately I knew, I go, these people are fake. They're sitting there yelling at the police aren't reacting to them, and they're like trying to make this thing up, like there's this riot or whatever happened. And then we moved up between the Supreme Court and the Senate building, and kind of looking back at the Capitol, and where I saw that guy creating the fish trap, which I realized it was, I was like, holy cow, they're just funneling people in. I'm like, where are all the gunshots? What are they doing? Why are they not shooting these people if this is what it is? And I realized, holy cow, this is staged. This entire thing is fake. So we sat there and we watched that for maybe an hour, and then we walked back to the house, and I was looking at what was being told on TV and what was being fed to us. I'm like, this entire thing is a facade. I mean, my God, this is the fakest thing I've ever seen. And we just had a coup because no one believed Joe Biden got 83 million votes. To this day, it's still the biggest lie. And we have Tina Peters in jail right now still, right? Tina Peters is in jail. She's a Gold Star mother. And that's happening. So that snapped me, right? And I knew I had to do something, which was like I lost my moral authority to do the hardest thing in my life, which is to stand over those caskets. And Colonel Kirk has done this, and many other people listening have probably done this. But once you do that, it's like that's the thing. There's a family on the other side of the world that and a mother that has lost and given the most precious thing in her life, which is the pure love between a mother and her son or daughter. They gave that to the country, and the country spit on it. And that was a red pill moment. I needed to get out. I didn't know anything. I was like, that was my Matrix moment, right? And so that woke me up. And then the next, through the grace of God, and I know that there's an angel looking over me, because what I went through the next year, and then to be woken up again to leave the military in very quick order when they tried to poison me with the COVID shot, that right there was good, but I still was not awake. And I'm not telling you I'm completely awake right now. I'm just more aware. And over the past 2 years, including a run for the United States Senate, to take on these demons, and then recognize that we have rigged elections in this country still to this day. I think they took President Trump and let him be back in power for one specific reason. He was the only one who could keep the facade going to some extent while he's trying to tear it down. And I have a lot of respect, and immense respect, for President Trump and what he's doing and everything else. So I don't want to tell you I'm negative President Trump, but I believe that the Matrix was like, this is the only man who can save us, not get us to the truth. And that's not a hit on President Trump. His bravery, I think, is why we're here and why we have this opportunity, and we better damn well take advantage of it.
So, and for those of you who are listening that's not ever been in the military, I want to kind of reiterate what Colonel Burton just said. So on my first deployment, which was to northern Iraq in 1991, I was a lieutenant. I was a wet behind the ear lieutenant that was on my first joint deployment. I worked directly for the Army 2-star that was there as his aide and exec officer. my primary job there was personnel readiness, keeping track of where everybody was in the northern theater of Iraq. And then in my other hours of the day, I flew around with General Jay Garner, who was Task Force Bravo commander. And my very first day forward, I flew into Incirlik. I was there for 2 weeks for like cultural orientation, forward deployed into northern Iraq. My C-130 landed at the Sursink airport, and I was standing out on the tarmac because our luggage was put over to the side because the forklift that took our luggage over there loaded 3 coffins onto the C-130 of guys that had just the day before been trapped in a minefield and blown to pieces. And when that is your first day on the job, it is one of the most life altering experiences that you have. And I liken being and like I told you guys, I spent 8 years as an enlisted person. Never experienced any of that. We went on mobility deployments and stuff like that with the aircraft, but I had never experienced anything like that. And that's our wartime job as a personnel officer, is personnel accountability. You do the casualty reports. You are intimately involved in the injuries. You have to go talk to the people in order to fill out all of your paperwork. It literally is life changing. It changes your entire perspective of life, and how precious it is. My replacement 2 rotations later was in the Black Hawk that was shot down. That was my job. She replaced me 2 rotations later. So life is very fleeting for people in the military that commit to that job. And as a colonel, when you're in a wing commander or equivalent job, you are never off duty ever. I got a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning to come to the morgue to identify one of the people that worked for me because they got into a fight with a significant other on I-85 just south of Atlanta and was hit by a car. Those are your life experiences as someone in the military. Probably the only a civilian equivalent is being the chief of police of a metropolitan area. In you own not own as in you like literally own people, but you are responsible for hundreds if not thousands of people and their livelihood. And so again, you cannot do that job, to Colonel Burton's point. You can't do that job if you're not 100% in it, because it takes your very soul to do that job. And the day that you realize, I'm getting goosebumps, but the day that you realize that, especially when you're still on active duty, I can't even imagine what you guys went through on active duty, finding out what I now know, and what we all know. It would literally be like ripping your soul out, because of all of the things that you have experienced, but every one of them was worth it because you are fighting for a noble cause. And when you wake up one day and you realize that that noble cause isn't actually the cause that you believed it to be, it is life changing for you because of all of the sacrifices that you've went through in order to do that job. Colonel Kirk, go ahead.
Yeah, once again, couldn't agree more. And for me, I spoke with my best friend, Bruce Bryant. Bruce and I went to the Air Force Academy together, and we had, this, all the service academies have it. We had this honor code. We will not lie, steal, or cheat, or tolerate among us anyone who does. And so that soul ripping you talk about, that is so much a part of who we are at the academy as graduates, and who all officers strives to be. But is such a foundational part of your experience together that when you serve together, 20 years down the road or whatever, it becomes such a bedrock foundation of your expectation of each other, because you know how important that was. We each had classmates disenrolled for the tiniest infraction that violated that honor code. And so having lived through that together and then see the service systematically lie in order to cover up
Yes.
Something that was so purely a narcotics related assassination job. And I mean, we have the wire taps, we have the intel, we know who it was, we know what was said, we know the motives, we know everything from top to bottom about what this really was, and yet we're officially saying it was something completely ridiculous and absurd. And that soul ripping that takes place as you read that report, it's like, we joked about it, we're like, we are the Death Star, we are the stormtroopers. And now that you know that, you thought you were the good guy the entire time, and now you realize, nope, we're the bad guys. And that's when you have to walk away, because no ounce of integrity can remain if you don't. And for those of us who, as Colonel Towner said, invested so much to take care of our troops, to get the mission done and exemplify those values, we can't spend 10 seconds in a position when you know the truth. And that's precisely what I saw happen. Over.
Yep.
Colonel, can I say something? I want to say that I have so much respect for Colonel Kirk and
Colonel Burton.
Yeah, I have so much respect for you too. Actually sent you messages, would love to connect with you out here, but I have so much respect for you guys for having the courage to say what you said. As somebody who was a former, I served a long time ago, not nearly the bona fides that you gentlemen have, but when I realized, when I had my red pill moment, it was extraordinarily difficult for me, because I felt like it was a kick in the groin, and it was the sucker punch, and I've come to realize that the United States as the government is, that's not what I support, but I love the idea of the United States. And the idea of the United States is what I cling to, and that's what keeps me going to go forward, to stay in this fight, because what we are is it's the idea of what we are supposed to be, not what we are. And shoot, I think it was JFK said it. Our ideas our problems are man-made, therefore we can't.
Go ahead, Ron.
JFK essentially said it best. He said, our problems are man-made, and therefore they can be solved by man. And that doesn't mean that we don't need spiritual guidance, but I absolutely believe that we can fix this. We can fix our country, but it's going to be a lot of dirty work, and I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. That's why we're all in this fight for truth. So we've kept everybody long enough. We're going on 3 hours. I can't thank you all enough for joining the panel. Thanks Alpha and King Khan, who had to run to do their other show. Again, thank you very much for doing this. I think sharing this information so that people understand there are good people in the fight that are going to address. I like basically everything that is attempting to be done. I use the analogy just because of my background of fixing the aircraft while it's flying. For those of you who understand how difficult that is to next to impossible, that is what we're asking this administration to do. This is at least 100 years in the making. So fixing where our republic got off track is a daunting task, but through prayer and dedication and the exposure of truth, no matter how difficult that truth may be, I think there's a shining light for those of us who have, in some cases, literally bled for this country. And I'm very optimistic about the future. This has been very enlightening for me. I learned a lot of stuff that I didn't know during this session as well. I just very heartfelt thanks to all of you for spending the time here with us tonight. Thank you, Colonel Burton, Colonel Kirk, Colonel, where did Scott go? I guess he's gone. Ron, thank you all for being here. God bless you all. And hopefully we can have another one with an update on some of the progress that we're seeing. But I'm going to go ahead and close the space.
Colonel, if I can, I'd love to do a follow up where seeing some of the things, the positive momentum that had actually been done by the Trump administration, the promotion of the Department of War again, things of that nature, and a lot of the DEI people that have been let go.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Any closing words from the panel?
Thank you. I have one point, and that it's just like, and I want to hammer it with this. This is a spiritual battle. We're now living and seeing a level above us, because that whole system was put in place. But what sorry, Scott, will you mute your mic? Can you get Scott to mute?
Yeah, I got it. I got it.
So it is a spiritual battle. It is a good versus evil. And here's the thing for the absolute secular list that's in this space right now. The one thing that has to be true is it's grounded to the mother, that her vote actually counts. We don't have rigged elections, so that our people that are representing us and making these decisions are actually accountable to the people. And I do believe that we would not be in a position we're in if we did not have rigged elections. And like I said, I'll say it one more time. Tina Peters, a Gold Star mother, is in jail right now for exposing that corrupt system. And that demon has not been excised from our polity, and until we get her out of jail, we are not free. Thank you so much, Colonel.
Amen.
Watkins, for us in space, and God bless you and your service.
Thank you. You too. Tim, did you want to say anything?
Yes, ma'am. I just want to echo those remarks. I agree completely with your assessment. I will just add the element that I think a lot of is a huge consequence of what we're talking about, and that is the veteran suicide problem. This is the area that I've kind of chosen to do my redemptive work. My wife and I developed the Warrior Healing Center to do veteran suicide prevention, but the spiritual aspect of this problem extends to this area, and the reason why over 150,000 veterans have killed themselves in the last 23 years, probably more, and all the science indicates that it could be much more, is a result of this very thing. And the moral depravity and the spiritual implications of what people experience in these combat environments and experience in just the moral realm, where they find out the truth or they get loaded up with identity and purpose in the military and then get out and suffer that collapse, only to find that the entire VA infrastructure and its pseudoscience of psychiatry is filling them full of poisonous medications under the guise of relief or healing or help, is a massive part to this. And I recognize that once again is a decades problem in the making. And the president certainly has a challenge in overcoming it, but it's something that we're working every day to address. I just ask everyone, please keep that in mind. Keep our veterans in your thoughts and prayers, because just this year alone, we will have over 6,000 veterans kill themselves. That the VA will admit to, and the research shows that's probably a lot closer to 12,000 veterans this year that will kill themselves, just like last year and the year before, going all the way back to 2001. The moral implications of that are vast, and that is part of this challenge that we have to face together. Over.
Amen. And thank you for that. Okay. Scott, did you want to say any last comments?
Well, I did. I think there are really three things I want to say. And, the first is I want to thank you for inviting me on here.
Sure.
But I think one of the most relevant topics we have right now is the transgender issue. I mean, in the public, but I wanted to share something about that because when it was implemented into the military in August, I guess it was 2016, yes. And, so we had, when I was out in Arif John, and they had representatives from the Surgeon General's office and high-level Army medical personnel trying to explain this new policy where they're going to allow actually sex changes, right? And how that was going to, how they were going to do that. It would take 4 months to recover and this and that. And, my question to them before and the funny part is going to be when they presented this to the soldiers. But my only question to them is, do we have surgeons that can actually perform this kind of operation? And then, the panel that came to tell us, they were shaking their heads back and forth, looking at each other, and because they didn't, but then, the next day, because a little cohort flying over to Kuwait thing, and they talked to the soldiers because they were told to, and it was part of their mission. And we gathered everybody into the church that we had. We would get everybody in there, and when they started explaining this, how the surgery would take 4 months to recover, but the soldier had to perform the standards for their MOS. So if they went to female to male, they had a harder time. Going from male to female, that's easier. Biologically thinking. But the thing was, they said, they told the soldiers what they had already told us. If they weren't satisfied with their sex change, they could change back. And so, a private in the audience, Joe's awesome. He goes, what, they can keep going back and forth? And the whole audience of soldiers erupted in laughter. So that was kind of the attitude. I couldn't laughing my ass up either. Just to think about that. And of course, after Trump came in, we stopped that. But the last thing I want to tell you about is it sounds like quite a few have faith, and so what most of you probably have been told is that there are 3 levels of war. Tactical, operational, strategic. But there's a 4th. It's spiritual. It runs through all of them.
Yep.
So keep faith.
I agree 100%. And that's an excellent way to close out this space. Keep the faith. So, God bless everybody. You guys have a great weekend. And we will do a follow up one, concentrating on the positives. And I will see you guys then. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Okay. Thank you guys for being here on Rumble. I appreciate it. I saw all your comments. Appreciate you being here. And you're very welcome as far as the service comments go. Take care.